Before you burn me at the stake for the title of this video, hear me out. I will explain myself because obviously it's very relevant to this video and I do need to properly explain, especially if I have a video titled like that. But basically, Lord of Mysteries, or Lord of the Mysteries is the actual title, has officially aired late last night, early this morning on Crunchyroll, and Episode 1 and Episode 2 is out, and the episodes are longer than the normal anime episode, or in this case, this is a Donghua. That is what a Chinese anime is called. It's called a Donghua, but the point of the matter is that the episode is actually 34 minutes. This is Episode 1, and Episode 2 is 36 minutes, as you can see. So it is definitely longer than the average episode for an anime. I mean, normal anime is usually like 22 to 24 minutes long. Sometimes if they're really pressing it for the time bracket slot, they can average up to maybe 28 minutes. ReZero is a good example of this. But basically, Lord of Mysteries, or Lord of the Mysteries, which, you know, for some reason Crunchyroll has Lord of Mysteries on this. More about that in a second. I will say that I like what I have watched. I like the first and second episode. It's great. It's enjoyable. It met my expectations to a degree. However, there was some things about this anime adaptation that did not meet the mark. And I guess, let's segue into that and let's discuss why I have the title like it is. So, it's very clear that the way this has been marketed for a very long time, it has generated a lot of hype. A lot of people have been extremely hyped about finally getting to see this animated. Mainly novel readers. People that have read the original source have been hyping up this series for basically since it was announced. Like, since it was announced it was getting a Donghua, people have been like, yo, I can't wait to watch this. Anyone that's going to dive into this, you're about to see one of the best series of all time. People have constantly been glazing and hyping this series up for months and even over a year at this point. A lot of big content creators on YouTube have discussed this already that don't even typically watch anime or Donghua. They're talking about Lord of Mysteries, so it's clear that it's gotten quite a bit of marketing. There's a lot of advertisement for the series, and a lot of people are diving into the series for the first time today. And a lot of people, this is going to be their first ever introduction to the world of Lord of the Mysteries, and they're going to be left confused. I'm going to straight up say it. Those that sit down and watch this anime for the first time, or Donghua, forgive me, it's a habit to say anime, but for those that sit down for the first time to watch this, they are going to be very confused. Now, to be fair, if you read the novel, there is things within it that also is very confusing. There's a lot of lore drop, there's a lot of info dumping and stuff, even in the novel, internal monologue and all of that. But kind of digesting it in an anime setting is a lot different than digesting and reading it in a novel. Because in a novel, you just see words on a page, and you're able to basically take your time, analyze it, and even come to your own conclusion on what is going on in your head. You're able to have this mental image of what the characters look like, the scene, the layout, and everything, and you can kind of weave your own story in your head while you're reading this said material on page, like on paper or on your desktop or mobile screen. And when you kind of transmit this into a anime or Donghua format, it can be a lot more difficult, especially to do the same type of info dumping and just all sorts of information at once. And that is where the title comes into play for this video. I was aware that Lord of Mysteries, or Lord of the Mysteries, was going to be quite heavy in info dumping and everything, because I took a peek at the novel. I've read it a bit. I'm not up to date or anything like that. I'm not going to act like I know the ongoing content of the series. I'm not going to say that. I've read a bit of it, just to get prepped for the anime, just to see, or Donghua, sorry, once again, very bad habit. But I've read it just to get prepped, okay? And I will say that in terms of story beats, it does match the novel. There is cut content, I will straight up admit that. I will say that there is content that is within this first and second episode that is missing, and I could definitely see novel readers that have read this series being extremely upset, especially if some of the cut content is very, very, very relevant later on down the road. I can understand that. However, looking at the way the anime, or Donghua, is presented for the first and second episode, it's almost impossible for them to be able to add all the content, and let's explain. So, when it comes to adapting something from, let's say, a like a novel or manga or whatever into an anime format, typically sacrifices have to be made. Typically, there has to be things cut to fit the pacing of an anime or Donghua format. That's just how it is. This goes for any form of adaptation, either live action movie, TV series, animation, whatever. It just typically depends. But yes, there always has to normally be sacrifices. Even some of the greatest works that people, even to this day, say is some of the best in cinema history, like Lord of the Rings, for instance, even Lord of the Rings had to sacrifice content, even in its extended cut editions. There was content still cut within it. And there is still conversation and discussion around that to this day, that people wish that some things were actually in the film adaptations of Lord of the Rings. So what I'm saying is no matter what adaptation it is, no matter how good it is, there will be things removed. That's just clear cut. That's how it's always going to be. However, it comes down to the studio, the staff, and everything depicting or figuring out what they can remove and add in or properly pace out to add in later if it actually works. And in this case, that gets into my main issue I have with the first and second episode of Lord of the Mysteries. It adds all the relevant content that you definitely need to kind of get to where the story is going to go. But it's thrown in your face so quickly with so much dialogue back to back with everything to world building, character settings, all these different type of names of different kingdoms, to the power system a little bit with like Beyonders and Spectators and all sorts of stuff. You're going to be legitimately confused. And it doesn't help the fact that Crunchyroll subtitles feels terrible. I'm just gonna say it. Like, there's a moment, like, there's ability called, like, audience or whatever, when, in fact, it should be called spectator. This seems like a very minor detail, but stuff like this adds up when Crunchyroll has, like, this translation that just feels very lazy. It feels like it's just half trying. It's doing a very vague or rough translation, and that's about it. And this is obviously following the typical format of what Crunchyroll normally does with anything they like to translate. I mean, ReZero is a good example. I'm not letting that go. They are known for just taking the easiest path and not doing anything at proper quality control or anything when it comes to translations. And in this case, I feel like the translations for Lord of the Mysteries is not that good. Obviously, the dialogue does follow the novels kind of consistently here and there, but there is some changes here and there that just start to mount up with a pile that starts to make things a little bit confusing. Like the way the typesetting and everything is about it, it's not good. I feel like there is a much better way for Crunchyroll to have subtitled this than what they did for these first two episodes. Now, with that being said though, it still does not negate the issues that the actual show has. And I think it comes down to the actual pacing. I have a friend, Nicholas Light, that has watched the series. He's going in blind. He has not read the novel at all. And he did a reaction to it. And I have yet to see the full reaction, what he did. But I know in his comments, because he pointed out that people are already saying, you know, you need to pay attention more. You need to keep your eyes on the screen and stop reacting or whatever. And I'm just, first off, you're watching someone react to something, so clearly, you know, they're going to react to content. They're not going to always be able to look at the screen because they're there for entertainment. That's the first off. But secondly, even if you were to 100% glue your eyes to the screen and try to pay attention to everything going on within this episode, in second episode, you're still going to be left confused. Like, I still will say that even if you have one of the most intellectual watchers, okay, that has never read the novel, they're still going to be left pretty confused about the first and second episode, which is pretty fitting. I mean, the title is Lord of the Mysteries, being mystery, you know, trying to understand what's going on, I guess, is the fun of it, which kind of it is. That's a little bit of the point. But it is an anime, or Donghua, and you're supposed to capture your audience and get them on board within the first episode. Now, obviously, there's 2 episodes out, but at the end of the day, if people are left so confused about the first episode, they might not want to sit down and watch the second episode. This could be a good or a bad thing depending on how the community wants to react to this, like original novel fans, because it might, you know, kind of gatekeep, like, newcomers into it, like COVID fans, for instance. I mean, obviously, that could be a thing. It might be a double-edged sword. But I think, in general, in terms of adaptation, I think it misses the mark for Donghua only or anime onlys that come into the series, because you're not going to tell me, if you have been paying attention to the series as a novel reader, that the marketing and advertisement for the show hasn't also been for newcomers. It has, 100%. As I said at the beginning of the video, there's a lot of people that are like big content creators that don't even talk about Donghua, don't even talk about anime. They are excited for the show. They're going to be experiencing this show for the very first time today. And I feel like a lot of people coming into this are just going to be left like, what did I just watch? And honestly, I could see a lot of people not even sitting down to watch episode 2. Because you got to remember, a lot of the mainstream audience, a lot of people that dive into anime and manga and stuff nowadays, or webcomics, they need that dopamine kick real quick when it comes to story and animation and art. And, I mean, I'm not trying to put down solo leveling, but soloing doesn't have the best story ever. But it was thanks to the great action and animation that, let's be honest, carried it. There is some good stuff about the story, but let's just be honest. And I feel like, yes, the art and animation of the show is simply gorgeous. Like, I will tell you right now that it definitely, in terms of what they've been marketing the advertisement for, like the art animation, it's some of the best bread animation I've seen as well. Like, up there with, like, Mushoku Tensei. But, on topic, though, I think that in terms of adapting it into a donghua or anime, it's not going to do well with new readers or newcomers. I don't think it will. I just legitimately don't. I could be wrong about this. Maybe I have a very obscure viewpoint on this, but I think the pacing of the show is terrible. Like, it feels quick, but slow. It's this weird middle ground between them. And yeah, it's going to be a tough sell. I think, like I said, like a few minutes ago, that it's going to gatekeep, I guess, newcomers, and it'll stop probably COVID fans from really getting into this. But I also think it's a double-edged sword, too, because it will potentially give this series a bad look, too. That people that, you know, don't understand it or don't want to understand it are going to think it's just, like, complex for the sake of being complex, and or, you know, convoluted just for the sake of being convoluted, and that's it. And I think that's not going to sit right with people. I could definitely see this getting a lot of accusations or things thrown at it because of that. I could be wrong, though. Could be, you know, just theory crafting too hard. But anyways, I will say that, art and animation-wise, yeah, that is a strong aspect to this show. One thing, actually, speaking of the art and animation, that does need to be said, I do think that regardless of how this adaptation goes, in terms of cut content, non-cut content, etc., I think that this is a strong argument for a competition for actual anime. Like, Donghua has been increasingly getting better and better over the years. I know people don't want to admit that. It's like a band-aid or trying to put a blindfold over you, and people don't want to accept that reality, but Chinese animation, Donghua, has been getting better. It has. Anyone that says otherwise hasn't been paying attention. It's slowly been creeping up to the surface and catching up with Japanese animation. And for those that are unaware, a lot of these animators that work on shows like this have been getting outsourced a lot by Japan themselves. So, if you're unaware, Japan nowadays, when it comes to a lot of their different animation studios, they outsource a lot of their work to, let's say, China, Korea, and other places like, you know, Vietnam and all that, the Philippines. They outsource a lot, a lot. If you go into the credits of a lot of different shows, you'll notice that there's a lot of different countries and people that are not even Japan working on a said show or episode. And so for years now, China has been actually working on some of our favorite shows of all time. And when you factor in how China operates and how, let's just be blunt, I'm not going to win any points or awards for this one, but China's able to offer basically slave labor and labor laws, all sorts of stuff like that, kind of make people work to the point where they pretty much die. You know, it comes to the point where it makes sense why they're able to output so much high quality stuff like, you know, Lord of the Mysteries, because they don't have the same restriction or laws like Japan has or America has, etc. So they're able to do whatever they want. On top of that, their labor is probably a lot more cheaper because of just how China operates. And then you throw in the mix that they've been practicing for years now thanks to the outsourcing from Japan to them. They have a lot of experience under their belt. They've able to kind of get experience on replicating certain art styles and animation styles and stuff, so now they can put that to work for their own donghua that they are now releasing to the public for everybody to see. So, what I'm trying to make here, the big point, is that in a few years, in the coming years, I don't know if Lord of the Mysteries will be the catalyst, or in this case, the one to pull the trigger, but I think that it's only a matter of time until Donghua is a straight up massive competitor to actual anime from Japan. I 100% give it a few years. If we have more projects that reach into the mainstream audience like 2B Hero X or this, then yeah, it will explode. Because it's getting closer and closer. People don't want to admit that, but it is coming. And I think that that is a big conversation that honestly is way above just this video alone. It could take a long time to really just dive into the individual details of why that's important and why it's eventually going to happen. But for now, what I'm going to say is Lord of the Mysteries is a good show. It's a good Donghua, good anime. Has problems though. It does. I am curious to see how episode 3 comes out. Apparently the pacing will slow down considerably with episode 3 according to sources from the inside. Don't know if that's true, but we shall see when episode 3 officially comes out. I'll leave it at that though. Thank you so much for watching. May all of you have a fantastic day or night wherever you live. Be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.